This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 6. Let's begin with the outcome in mind.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host Ramsey Majaba. Ramsey can't really say mandatory, secondary, or February. Stay tuned to see exactly how he says it.
Hello tout le monde and welcome to another podcast. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And yes, it took me a little bit of work for me to get to say mandatory, February. See, I was raised in Lebanon, and in school they taught us to not waste time by saying mandatory and say mandatory. See, it's a little bit shorter. February. We're just not wasting as much time. And I was talking to my other Lebanese friends, and they actually say the same thing, so I'm not as abnormal as people think. But that's a debate to be had at another day. Today's discussion is with Mohamed Barkhad. Mohamed is a consulting sales engineer at Cisco. He's been there for a while, and as I have with all my other guests, I have enjoyed this conversation today, and I learned a few nuggets from him, including that I'm actually doing things right, which, even though it might be weird to say, it's a good thing to learn. You never know if you're doing something right or wrong, so have affirmation that you're doing something right is a good thing. Show notes can be found at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show6. All links will be included as well. I'm not affiliated with the programs that Mohamed mentioned. I am, however, affiliated with Amazon, so if you buy anything after you click through my site, I do get a teensy-weensy commission at no cost to you. So let's bring Mohamed in. Hey Mo, welcome to the show.
Hey Ramsey, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. You and I go way back, but for those people who don't know you, why don't you state your name and occupation for the record?
Sure. My name is Mohamed Barkhad. Right now I'm based out of Chicago, Illinois. I'm a consulting systems engineer with Cisco. I've been with Cisco for close to 4 years now as an SE. Right now I'm a consulting SE, but before that I was a generalist SE. And then before Cisco I was with Nokia, which formerly was Alcatel-Lucent. I was there for close to 3 years as a TAC level 2 support engineer for the 5620 SAM application and for the service router business as well. And then before that, I had various experiences from a network support engineer. I had close to 3 to 4 years before that in various different roles as a network support engineer. So happy to be here, and really love the idea of the podcast.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So you've done quite a bit, and I'm kind of want to dig into that. Just from maybe we can start by defining the positions that you did. So when you say TAC or support, what was your main role there?
Sure. So while I was in Alcatel-Lucent, my main role was I was supporting service provider customers, Tier 1 and Tier 2 service provider customers. And initially I was supporting the 5620 SAM application. That was the network management application that Alcatel-Lucent had at the time. And, anytime customers from these Tier 1, Tier 2 service provider customers across North America, which includes the U.S. and Canada, anytime they would have issues with the application, we were the primary first line of support. We would help them, whether it was, software issues, whether it was, networking issues. And from there, we would escalate. If we couldn't resolve it, we would escalate it to our Tier 3 team. And then from there, they would escalate it to Tier 4 if it's a bug on the code. So, we were kind of the first line of support for Tier 1, Tier 2 service provider customers. And then I moved to the service router team, supporting the 7750, 7210, 7250, 7705. And I really enjoyed my experience there. Similar role, first line of support for Tier 1 service providers and Tier 2 service providers. But this was more networking because these routers we're the backbone, I would say, from a service provider perspective, and I would help them with network issues like OSPF, BGP, and it really allowed me to gain a lot of knowledge from a networking space. I got my NRS1 and NRS2. Those were the certifications for Alcatel for the network routing specialist. And then I actually, in that role, I actually got my first CCIE routing and switching because I started working on more and more advanced networks, and that kind of motivated me to take my learning to another level. And yeah.
Awesome. So just to be clear for everybody listening, NRS1 and NRS2 are similar to CCIE and CCNA and CCNP, correct? Exactly.
Yeah, they're the CCNA and the CCNP level certification for Alcatel.
Okay. So basically, whenever something bad happened, a customer would call you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Was that fun? Did you enjoy being called at all manners of the day? Maybe not the way I say it, but did you enjoy working on different problems from different customers?
You know what I did. Initially, I felt really stressed because when you're working on outages and you're seeing customers like really panic. My first outage, I was really stressed. I can't lie, but I realized that at the end of the day, the customer, you have to be able to kind of focus on the issue, and at the same time let the customer know that calm the customer down, let them know that you're working on it, and then from there, working on more and more outages, I got comfortable with it. I started to see patterns. Certain signatures would make me think, okay, I've seen this before, and as I got more and more comfortable with it, I got more and more. I enjoyed the role more as I got better and better in it. I was blessed to be the outage lead for North America for when I was part of that 7750 group. I was taking in outages daily basis, and it was definitely a good experience from a technical perspective, and a good experience handling customers that are really panicking and really upset. And it was a good experience overall, and I enjoyed it for sure.
Okay. And what was the thought process about moving from that to being an SE?
Great question. Actually, when I was part of the 7750, tax support team, I was working with SEs. SEs would create cases, and they would need help with their proof of concept and that type of thing. So I'd actually work with SEs, and through working with SEs, they started to get to know me, and they started to reach out to me directly. And then from there, I started to meet system engineering managers within Alcatel-Lucent. And I was actually offered an SE role in New York while I was in Ottawa. But at that time, I just got married, and I realized that, this might not be the best idea, just because, I'm taking somebody else with me. I just wanted to stay in Ottawa at that time. And then I realized that, maybe there was an opportunity elsewhere to be a SE within Ottawa. And then when my friend from Cisco reached out to me, Mehdi Abdi from Cisco, Calgary, he reached out to me and he told me about this program called Jumpstart Program. And the program was like 1 year training to be an SE. And then from there, you would be an SE for a field team. In my case, I was in Ottawa, so I was in public sector. I jumped at the opportunity. I thought that it was the best thing for me because it allowed me to ease in to the SE role and not just go in right away. It allowed me to get 1 year training, product training, 1 year sales training, 1 year presentation training. I did the fire up training, which was really cool. So it kind of allowed me to ease into the role from going into being a support engineer to a systems engineer. Going from a post-sales to a pre-sales job, it kind of was the bridge for me to be able to be an SE.
So you weren't just thrown in the fire and asked to start like demoing stuff. They actually took the time to train you. So that's excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
What would you say the main differences are between being an SE and being a tier 1 support engineer?
I think so. As a support engineer, you're typically in a cubicle and you're typically interfacing with customers over the phone, and it's mainly kind of technology focused and technical focused, and you're kind of in your own element, right? But as an SC, you're meeting with managers, directors, CIOs. You're presenting. You're going to customer site. You're presenting. Whether the architecture or the solution that you're proposing for the customer. I think there's a social aspect of an SE that you can never learn as a support engineer in the context that you're meeting with customers directly, face to face. You're taking them out to eat. You're presenting in front of people of interest, and it's just a different element from a social element. And I think that's one of the things that I had to learn, and that 1 year helped me, is understanding, at first I was like, I don't know how comfortable I feel, making a presentation, because in my support engineer role, I was never in that. But, after practice, we had something called Roleplays, where we can, kind of do a mock role play of a customer environment. And as I got, as I was able to practice on those role plays, I felt like I got better and better, with that. And I think that's the biggest learning curve for me from being a support engineer to go into to being SE.
Did you find the role plays being helpful at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that really helped me was the fire up training. And some of the principles I learned in the training I use today. Like, for example, one of the principles is every meeting has an outcome. Every meeting has an outcome. So the goal for you is, for that meeting, start with the outcome in mind and then work backwards. And what I mean by that is, for example, you're in a sales cycle, whether it's the beginning or the end, every meeting you have to close something, right? In the beginning, you're gaining requirements and you want to close to present, to create, a schedule so that you can come back to the customer and present the solution. And then after you present the solution, you want to be able to start a POC. And then when you want to start a POC, you want to close from a technical perspective. So every meeting has an outcome, and it's like focus on that outcome. You don't need to show every single detail of every solution or of every product. You just need to get to that outcome. And how do you get there? And then some of the things that I also learned in that fire up training was just the communication skills, right? Just increasing your tone, just so that the customer does not get bored, and body language, how to interact with the customer and make sure that they're engaged. So a lot of those principles I still use today. And I think that fire up training was one of the most impactful trainings I've ever been to.
And the fire up training, that's something specific to Cisco, right? Or is it something that anybody can?
It's a third party. Yeah, okay. It's a third party. It was part of my Jumpstart program, but it's a third party. I think if you Google it, it's called Fire Up Training, and it's by these two experts, like presentation experts, and they do it for different companies, and they're like a third party, and they help with presentation, they help with communication.
Okay, I'll Google that. I'll Google that, and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody to take a look at. But from what I understand from you, it's more of a company-wide thing, as in you wouldn't be able to go and purchase that sort of training. The Cisco would have to go buy it. Okay.
Exactly. It was a sponsored thing, yeah.
So I like the idea of every meeting has an outcome, and that's true, basically. Otherwise, there's no point to that meeting. But that's generally something you would do with your salesperson, or that's the salesperson's job, I think, more than it is yours, or as a team, maybe. Let's say as a team, it's your job to figure out what the outcome is. How do you work with your sales guy today? Or I don't think you have a sales guy today, right?
Yeah. So right now, my PSS actually interesting. My PSS actually left, but I'm getting a new PSS soon. But my previous PSS, he's my sales guy, and we would interact very closely. We would talk to each other about 3 to 4 times a day. We would compare notes. I cover a large territory as a consulting systems engineer, so I cover 5 states and I cover 83 customers. So, I support systems engineers that are closer to their customers in global enterprise, and I'm focused on the cloud managed architecture. So I'm more high level as a CSC than I was as an SC. I'm more architecture focused. So for my PSS, my sales rep, we cover such a large territory, so we kind of do what we can to spread ourselves so that we can cover that territory. So like depending on where the customer is in the sales cycle, if it's in the proof of concept stage, I'm more involved and I'm giving him updates. But if it's more of trying to start a first meeting, that's kind of where he's more engaged with that customer. So we kind of try to spread ourselves so that we can hit as much customers as we can and support our account teams, and at the same time, be able to be more productive.
What does TSS stand for?
Product sales specialist. It's
Okay.
kind of like an account manager.
Okay.
It's an account manager for a particular architecture.
Yeah. I heard TSS, product sales specialist. Yeah,
Specialist, yeah.
So at Spirent we just call them overlay sales. They are the sales
Yes, we're
specialists.
overlay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you talk on a daily basis 3 to 4 times. So like before a meeting, do you like get together and with the local team? How does it work for you guys?
So the way that it typically works is we have a local account team that supports the customer, and typically they engage us. They see an opportunity for us. They will typically, get the technical requirements from the customer, and then once they take the technical requirements from the customer, they'll reach out to me and my PSS, and they'll provide us those details, and then see if we can schedule a meeting with the customer directly. First, can we support all the technical requirements, and if we can we meet with the customer directly to either do a presentation and or demo, just to kind of give an idea of the solution to the customer. So that's typically how it works. And then from that, typically we want to have a POC, generally speaking. And then from the POC, we will want to take it to the next step and see if we can get a pilot going. And then from there, hopefully, get a PO. But it just depends on, different customers are in different parts of the sales cycle. But that's kind of how we kind of work together.
Okay, so I have like a few questions to dig into this a little bit more. You mentioned that the sales team gets you the technical requirement. How much of the local sales team is a generalist sales team, so they have to know a little bit about all the products, correct?
Exactly, yes.
So how much of the technical requirement are you expecting to receive from the overlay, from the account SE? Does he have the knowledge to know everything?
Yeah. So, for example, let's say software-defined WAN, right? Let's say the account team, received something from the customer that said, "Hey, we're interested in understanding what Cisco has from a software-defined WAN perspective." Typically, one of the things I like to ask for software-defined WAN is, what is the business driver? Is there a cost savings? Are they trying to move away from what they're doing right now? Is it to save money? I like to understand that, and also like to understand, for example, what applications do they expect to go across the WAN? What type of links? Is it an MPLS link? Is it a broadband link? Is it an LTE link? And then from there, it's like, what are some of the customer specific, features that they require? Do they require, for example, BGP, or do they require, ability to do VPN, these type of things? And from there, we have to understand, how we fit. Many times we support all the requirements, but sometimes there might be 1 or 2 requirements that we don't support, but we can solve a different way. And and that's sometimes what we propose to the customers. Hey, this is the problem that you have. These are the features that you required. But what about, can we solve it in a different way through this approach? And then based on the feedback on the customer, then we kind of go from there. But typically I require business requirements, ideally understanding, what is the business driver, and then some technical requirements. With software-defined WAN, there's some questions that I immediately ask that I know are important. But from there, they just provide other technical requirements, and then we can just, have that context in mind before we meet with the customer. Then our focus is showing how we meet those technical requirements, and what are our differentiators that allow us to differentiate ourselves from the market.
So when you're saying questions that you like to ask, are you asking that to the customer, or are you asking that to your SE, to the local SE?
My account team, my SE, my local SE, my
Okay.
local SE. I like to have the context before going into the meeting, just because it allows me to look like I'm more prepared. If I'm asking basic questions, sometimes, customers are different, but sometimes the customer could say, hey, I've already told, this person that already. So I like to be as prepared as I can before I see the customer, get as much of the requirements as I can. But I'm not shy of asking questions as well, even though that, this is, I like to understand if there's something that I'm missing. I like to understand that as well. So I'll bring that up in the meeting as well.
Okay, that's great. Based on this, are you asking? Are you giving your SEs, your local SEs, this information that, hey, I need, when you go to see a customer and they say they want something about SD-WAN, this is what I need you to ask? Like, is that something that you have pre-agreed on, or do they just know that's out of experience?
Yeah, great question. So generally speaking, if I find out about this opportunity after the SE already met the customer and got the technical requirements, and if I feel like I don't have enough technical requirements, I might ask the SE, hey, maybe go back and ask these type of questions. But if they let me know about this opportunity before they gather the technical requirements, then I'll give them a list of questions and say, hey, these are some of the questions that I have. That'd be great for me to understand whether or not we can support these requirements, whether or not would be a fit for them.
Okay, awesome. And just a note here, you mentioned that, hey, the customer usually, you ask for the business requirements, which is pretty much the most important thing for the customer. And in general, if you're going to meet a customer, they don't know how they want you to solve a problem. They just know that this is I'm losing money here, fix it for me. But then you also mentioned that if a customer is asking for a specific way of doing things, generally, in my experience, that means they have talked to somebody else who kind of geared them towards, like, your Cisco. Let's say they talked to Nokia, and Nokia geared them towards their strength. And now it's your job to, this is what they told you. Well, this is, how about you do it this way, and it solves more problems for you. So, yeah, generally speaking, customers don't know how to solve the problem. It's not their job. That's why they got you. Otherwise, they wouldn't actually ask you to be there.
Yeah, great point. Some customers, they leave it kind of, we just want software defined WAN, and that's fine. And then some customers, they've either through Gartner or they've done their own kind of homework, and they look at the landscape and they have an idea. Hey, this is what we want. Yeah, you're right. When I hear things from requirements, sometimes I know, hey, this vendor reached out to them. If I hear a specific feature, I'm like, you know what, and I let my account team know we have to do more selling because they've talked to this competitor. If this is one of their this is one of the value propositions, and this is one of the requirements that they have, so we have to keep that in mind. So you're absolutely right. If you don't, sometimes customers just want software, they just want a particular solution, and they don't know the requirements, and vendors tell them what they should have, and sometimes they've done their own research, and they have the requirements set, and then you're just going to have to meet that requirement.
Awesome. Something else you mentioned was, like, you try to drive them to go to a POC. When I went on Reddit the other day and I was just looking into some SE stuff, and a lot of people were just saying, like, hey, shorten the sales cycle, try to skip the POC, whatever. What's your experience? Has skipping the POC ever worked for you?
No. And then maybe it's my business. I support global enterprise, so these are like the largest customers. And sales cycles are different than like commercial or any other business where it's like, some commercial sales cycles are like 1 to 2 months, but but global enterprise, sales cycles are over 1 year. And, there's a lot of money involved. Like, this is a big decision that they're making. If they're going to deploy your solution across 4,200 locations, I haven't seen an instance where they said, let's not do a POC. I've never actually, like, most customers that I have, definitely POC is required. If not, on top of that, pilot is required. So they require POC, and after the POC, they require a pilot, maybe a particular location, and then have their applications actually go through it. And then from the pilot, depending on the success of the pilot, then that's how they'll make their decision. So I actually, I think it depends on the business. I think some commercial customers, they might not need a POC, and I think it depends on also the solution, depending on like for example, catalyst switches, which is different than, for example, an software-defined WAN router, right? Catalyst switches have been known to perform really well, but software-defined WAN is a new market, and you want to be able to make sure that the vendor is giving you what they promised. And my experience is that POC is definitely required for most customers, global enterprise customers, and if not, pilot on top of that.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. Like if someone has some of our products and they just want to expand a little bit more, they already know what our product does. They don't need a POC. But if they're buying something completely new, and the more the dollar value is of the sale, the more risk it is for the customer, and they want to alleviate that risk by making sure it works. And it makes sense for them to want a POC. And some people go without POCs, but that's usually for very, very small value. Like if you're buying something for like 10K or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you wouldn't buy a car without a test drive, and that's a POC, right?
Exactly. And this is definitely sometimes a lot bigger than that. So
yeah,
absolutely, you want to test drive that.
So we talked. What's a pilot? Can you explain a little bit about what a pilot is?
In their production environment, let's say they have 100 or maybe 500 locations, and then from a POC perspective, this is typically done in a lab, and they try on the most part to simulate a real production environment by putting applications such as voice through that lab network. They might even be able to put their point of sale application over that lab network, but it's not a real production environment. It's not a real production network. So depending on the success on the pilot, typically you go through a test plan and you test particular functionalities that is required from that solution. Then the next step is going to a pilot, which is a real production environment. It could be a store, it could be a sales office, but in that case, this is a real production environment with real users that are using the environment. And typically a pilot will be there for a couple weeks to a couple months, and then based on the performance and based on the feedback from the users of the applications, that's kind of where they judge based on whether this is a good fit or not.
Okay, so all of this we're talking about, like, this is everything that the SE is involved in, like from like POC pilot, right? But the SE is not there alone. There's in your case, there's a PSS. What constitutes a good relationship, you think, between an SE and a PSS?
I've had in my career, like in my 4-year career in sales, I've probably had, I would say 5 different PSSs, well, AMs as well, when I was a Cisco SE. And I think, look, in my relationship and kind of, what I feel like it should be a partner relationship. One thing I don't like to be used as a resource. I don't want to be just a resource, right? Where I'm just focusing on, engineering tasks. I want to understand the business aspect of it. I want to understand what is the partner strategy. I want to understand, how far we can go in discounts. I want to understand the commercial agreement. I want to understand all that aspects. And I find that, a good PSS is one, and a good AM and a good SC relationship is one that shares everything, right? Like for example, me and my previous PSS, I would share my engineering, results, and he would share, what's happening from a commercial side and the partner strategy and which partner how much discount we give to what partner and why we're doing that and what's the lowest discount we can provide and and all that aspects of it, and I learned a lot from the business side, and sometimes the sales rep learns a lot from the engineering side, and I think, it should be a true partnership. It should be two people that communicate regularly, that share updates, and that's a true partnership, in my opinion.
I like that. I agree with that 100%. Do you feel like, but it's also part of the PSS's purview is to also use you as a resource, though, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good point. There's some tasks that I'm definitely going to do that my PSS will not be able to do in terms of, like...
You don't want him to do those. You don't want him to do the POC.
And I don't even want to, because I don't want them to waste cycles on that. I can take care of that. I can work independently with the customer. We can be able to do multiple things at once, right? But, I don't, when I say, being used as a resource, I just mean like, when I ask questions about, what discount, like, no, don't worry about that. Focus on your technical engineering. I've actually had an a PSS that said that to me before, So that's what I mean by not feeling like you're just a resource, and that it's a true partner relationship, that you're sharing everything, because, there's things about the business I would like to know from my own knowledge, and that will help me give context when I'm speaking to the customer.
I agree 100%. You should know what the business is about, because sometimes if you're just a pure engineering resource, you might be in a meeting and just screw the whole sale by adding an engineering information. Did you know that this doesn't work like that, actually? Something to that effect. So you need to know. I'm 100% with you there. So you mentioned you have one AM that treated you just like a resource. How did you deal with that? How did you get overcome? Did you fire him, or how did you get past that?
So I was only with that particular PSS for, I think, 4 months. So when I started this position, I had that person, and immediately I felt the difference of the relationship, and because I was very new in the role, I wanted to just kind of feel it out. And see what happens. But then, within 3 to 4 months, this person left, and and I never really had a chance to fix that, and that's kind of something that I regret. It might have been better to voice my opinions earlier, but I felt that I was still new in the role, and I was still new in the relationship, and I wanted to basically, just tread lightly initially. And then as I got more and more comfortable, voice my opinion and say, what, I want to be more involved in the business side of things, just so that I can be a better SE, But I was only with that person for 4 months, and unfortunately, we haven't. I haven't been able to fix that, because we were with each other for such a short period of time.
For what it's worth, and it's my opinion, you can take it or leave it, I don't think you have anything to regret, and this is not a psychology podcast, but here's my 2 cents. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to get to know the person before starting talking to them, because you could have fixed it, but it could have also went the other way and made it really, really worse. So I think it was a good decision to wait a bit to know how the other person thinks before you voice your opinion, or voice your displeasure with that. For whatever it's worth. And
thanks for that, and I appreciate that. And that's kind of my thought was, let's wait a little bit. Let me understand where that person is coming from. Let me understand what other things that maybe the person is kind of considering when making this decision. But you're right. It's better to kind of wait a bit and just feel it out, more than just try to force something that might come back to bite you.
Yeah. And I have an analogy about the SE, the sales team, that I think you would appreciate, because we used to play basketball together. I think of the SE team as like a basketball team, where the sales guy is Michael Jordan and I'm Scottie Pippen, and my job is to do whatever I need to do to help the sales guy do his job, really, and which is basically to close business and bring in revenue for the company and make the customer happy at the same time. So yeah, that's how I think about it. And I just recently decided that, and I want to share that with you because of our history of me winning against you in basketball.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's a great analogy, and totally agree with that analogy.
You don't agree that I used to win against you in basketball? You skipped that part.
Sorry?
I used to win against you in basketball. You don't agree with that?
I don't know. I disagree with that. I definitely disagree with that. I mean, I don't know. My memory's it's lost at those times, so I don't know what you're talking about.
That's because of the few bumps that I gave you while you were trying to drive into the lane. All right, man. Well,
oh, man.
Well, this is awesome. I'm enjoying this, and I'm just going to ask you one more question before we move on to the not so fire round. Just can you briefly describe a day or a week in your life, whatever you think is more representative of what you do?
Sorry, a day in a week? A day or a week in my life?
Or a week in your life as an SE, as a specialist SE.
Sure. I can maybe go a week. On Mondays, I call it the admin days. That's when I have my team meetings for our whole sales team from a BU perspective. Then I have my SC team meeting, and then I have my region sales meeting. So my Monday morning is kind of booked with kind of more admin meetings where I have to attend and share what we either share with some of the meetings in terms of what challenges that I have, or share strategies for upcoming week or potentially upcoming quarter. So I would say Mondays are more my admin days. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I travel about 40 to 50% of the time because I cover 5 states. So half the time I'm on the road meeting with customers, whether it's a POC scenario, whether it's kind of more of a lunch and learn scenario, whether it's more of a training scenario. So I would say Tuesdays to Thursdays are really, really customer focused. I'm meeting customers in person or virtually through WebEx. I'm coming to customer sites. I'm executing on the plan that I made on Tuesday. I'm executing on the plan that I made on Monday for that week, and then Friday typically is I like to use Friday. Sometimes my Friday mornings I will leave it up for customer meetings. So virtually, I like to work from home on Fridays, catch up on all my emails. I'll take customer meetings in the mornings on Fridays, but then I like to leave the evenings and afternoons for my own personal education, whether it's updates on products that we're selling, whether it's updates on architectures that we're building, whether it's looking at our SE blog posts and seeing learning from other SEs, whether it's building my own lab and doing things in the lab to test different features. I like to leave my Friday afternoon for my personal development. And sometimes it works so that I don't have that Friday afternoon because there's always that urgent customer meeting. And with sales, it's every sometimes every meeting is urgent, but I try to push back when I can. I still understand that if it's customer related, I still have to get on the call. But I like to have my personal development. I like to have at least 3 to 4 hours a week where I can personally develop on myself somehow.
How do you push back?
It depends. It depends. I can ask, can we do this on Monday? I can ask, I try initially to delay it. And if they say that, usually Fridays, customers are not pushing for meetings because they sometimes leave early or, Fridays are more of a laid back day. But if it's an urgent meeting, I'll take it. Otherwise, I'll ask if we can potentially do it, on Monday or Tuesday, push it to a different date.
So you're not shutting it down. You're just asking for another day.
Yeah, usually. If I feel like it's not, some meetings are I feel like they could be handled a different day. But some meetings I know, it's near the end of the sales cycle. We've just done the POC. They have a question or a particular feature, and it's urgent, and then I have to jump on that call. But other than that, I try to save my Friday afternoons as much as possible. And my sales rep, my PSS, knows that, and never books me for Friday afternoon meetings. But some of the account teams will try to get on my schedule. And what I've done actually now, which really helps me, is actually book out my schedule so that no one can book me. And that really helps me from a Friday afternoon perspective. I'll book out my Friday afternoon so that nobody can get on my calendar. Sometimes people will still try to get on the calendar, but that's really helped me, to stop that from happening.
I do exactly the same thing. I have my Friday afternoon booked on my pretty much everything I do, I have it booked on my calendar just so that if my sales guy wants to book me, it's just easier for everybody. It's more efficient than someone asking you, hey, do you have time then? It's like, oh, let me check my calendar. No, my calendar is accessible. Everybody can see it. They know what I'm doing, and they can book it, and they don't have to ask me any questions. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Sure.
You mentioned you have a home office. I'm curious. Yeah. Do you have a standing desk or a sitting desk?
I have a little small office. I have a sitting chair, a sitting chair. I have my video conferencing unit. I have my laptop. I have all my networking gear. It's kind of like my home office / lab because I have my gear there. So it's I actually work from home a lot. If I'm not traveling, I would say most of the time I'm working from home. If I'm only in the office if there's specific meetings, but I'm working from home a lot. So I have a nice little office when I work from home.
You know what? I'd love to get you back to discuss the discipline of working from home and how to handle travel so much whenever you have the time later on. But for now, we're going to have to move on to the not so fire round. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you're going to take your time answering them. Does that sound fair?
Okay. Sounds good.
And so you know Hikmat, he's a colleague of yours. When I asked him, other than a notebook and a pen, what is essential tool for an SE? And he looks at me and he just says, I don't use a notebook and a pen. So he screwed up my question. But for you, other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool an SE should be using? I don't know why I'm using my sexy voice.
So I actually use a notebook and a pen when I take notes from customers. So I use that. I have my laptop. With me, and I have all my customer data in folders. So I like to organize all the previous conversations, previous requests, and typically when I'm presenting, if customers ask a question, I'll write it down in my notebook. But then once I get that, once from that notebook, I actually put it in a folder and put it in a Word document so that I don't forget. So outside of that, in customer meetings, that's what I use typically. But in general, I have a lot of links that I use within my laptop for whether it's product specific training, whether it's specific resources to create a bill of materials. I have a multitude of links which are saved, which I use in my laptop. So really, my laptop, I need it to be productive. I can't live without my laptop. It has everything there for me. So usually I take my laptop with me to customer meetings, and if I'm not in customer meetings, I have all the resources that I need to get business done on my laptop.
So, have you ever used Rocketbook or Evernote?
Rocketbook or
Evernote or OneNote?
Evernote?
Yeah.
OneNote? No. I have a Word document, and I have a folder for all my customers. Each customer have a folder, And then for my receipts, I also have a separate set of folders, and I include every trip in its own folder. And then I actually digitally take a picture of every receipt, and then I put it in that folder so that when I use to do my expenses, it's all digital. I can just copy it and send it to the system. So yeah, no, I use Word. I use Word typically for taking notes from customers.
I'm just bringing it up because like if you have a Rocketbook notebook, you can take a picture and you with the app, and it will automatically send it to like OneNote or Evernote. Evernote has a built-in tool where you can take a picture of the note, and it'll post it on Evernote, and it's searchable. Like even handwriting, you can search your handwriting, and you can tag it by customer. I haven't used OneNote, but it should be similar. I've been using it recently. Evernote, I've been trying it out, and I'm liking it so far. It's just easier than going back and typing everything up. It's just take a picture, and I can search it.
Yeah, no, I'll take a look at that. Definitely, any tool that'll help me be more productive, and like that seems like a really good idea because I do take a lot of notes. So being able to take a picture and have it automatically go to the OneNote and be able to be searchable, I think that's pretty, it's pretty good. So I'll definitely take a look at that.
Awesome. Any book or resource or podcast every SE should read or listen to?
I think it depends on architecture. So if you're a security guy, I've heard that CyberWire podcast is really good because you learn a lot of security terminology. I've been more watching my own SCVTs, more Cisco videos. I haven't really went into to use the CyberWire, but I've heard that the CyberWire podcast is really good for people that want to get into the security space. I would say from an education perspective, every SC should be well informed of their, architecture and their solutions and their products. They should also have industry certifications that are respected because I feel like, customers see that and they also, give you a level of respect and they trust what you say if they see that you are certified and that you have a certain level of credibility. So I'd advise, it doesn't have to be Cisco. It could be in other industry certifications, like, for example, Lucent, Nokia, whether it's Cisco, whether it's Juniper, get your certifications because it's good to understand and be able to engineer what you're working on. I would advise the fire up training for every SC. I think, it definitely changed my approach, and I still use those principles from fire up training, and it really changed the way that I thought about communication. And then also, I would advise any, book that goes over personal relationships, because, you're working so close with the customer and you're building these relationships. And I have some customers that I actually, became good friends with, like outside of work, and we meet for Tim Hortons sometimes when I was in Ottawa. It's those relationships that will help you, be successful, and they might mature into a lifelong friendship. So any books on personal relationships, I think is very, very helpful for an SE.
Is there one you'd recommend? If not, I can throw one out there.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I can't think of any at the top of my head, but I'll definitely let you know, later on in the future, so that you can include it in the links for sure.
Have you ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie?
No, I haven't.
It's a fairly old book. It's all common sense. There's nothing groundbreaking about it, but it was a fun listen because I listened to it on Audible. It's all about making friends and influencing people, which is pretty much what we do in sales.
Okay. I would love to listen to that for sure. I think it's anytime I can learn something, anytime, especially with personal relationships, because I'm constantly meeting new customers, constantly, working with them and getting close with customers. So I'll love to, listen to that for sure.
Awesome. I'm glad I could help.
Yeah.
Is there a tip or trick? You already mentioned one for time management and task organization. Other than time blocking your stuff on Outlook, because you already mentioned that. That's cheating.
Yeah. for time management, I like to control what I can control, but honestly, when you're in the field, things just take over, and I ended up just going over my schedule. I just like to I like to break up my week in how I mentioned earlier. I like to have some personal development on Fridays. On Mondays, I like to do my admin work, and then leave Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to field exercises. Monday afternoons, I also do field exercises, and just kind of go from there. Things might change, depending on the sales cycle, depending on the time of the year. Like Q4, you're not going to do much personal development there, especially at the end of Q4, because you're focusing on closing your year. But, Q1, beginning of Q1, that's when people take their vacation, and that's when, it's usually in the summertime, and then, you'll have more time there to work on personal development. It might be, Thursday afternoons and Friday afternoons. So it just kind of changes depending on the time of the year. But for me, personal development is very, very important. And I feel like technology is always changing. The market is always changing. Our competitors are always changing. And I feel like you have to kind of take yourself out, and be well informed of everything around you. So yeah.
Okay. I will take that. That's very good. So is it the same in Chicago as it is in Ottawa, where July, August, it's pretty much a ghost town?
Yeah.
Okay.
July, August is like near the end of the Q4. So end of July is like end of our Q4. So it's pretty busy right up to the end of July. And then I would say the last week of July and the first week of August, it's a ghost town. You won't see that many people there because people normally take their vacations right after the end of Q4. And then, middle of August is typically a sales conference to the end of August. So then really August, August is probably the slowest out of all the other months. But I also noticed a lot of differences in culture in Ottawa and in Chicago. I find Ottawa is definitely more of a family environment. Everybody's there for a long period of time. The SEs there have been there for like 5-10 years. But I find in Chicago it's a lot more dynamic. I've been in this role for 1 year and 4 months, and I've seen teams where, since I've been in this role, the manager left, more than half the SEs left, more than half the salespersons left. And it just seems like more of a dynamic nature. People are staying in their roles for a couple of years and moving on. So that's one of the most interesting things I saw different from Chicago and Ottawa.
Has that affected you in any way, shape, or form? Like having a more dynamic environment?
I think you see more opportunities in terms of, where you can see yourself going in the future. There's obviously more roles available. And I think from a growth perspective, there is more growth, but then from a relationships standpoint, it's definitely not the same, knowing that, this person might not be there in a year. So I definitely feel like the culture I like the culture in Ottawa a bit more, but I like the opportunity in Chicago more. So it's kind of a give and take of both.
So you brought up an interesting topic here, and I'm usually asked a lot, like what is the next career move for SEs usually? What is that in your opinion?
Some like to take the manager route. I personally I'm not that person. Just because I love technology, I love staying close to technology, staying close to customers. I'm not saying a manager is not, but that's just not my career approach. I think for me, every 2 to 3 years, I like to assess myself, and I like to assess my personal development. And for me, the reason I went from an SE to a CSE is because I felt that I can get more technical and deeper focused on an architecture. And for me, I can see myself continually being a specialist. Whether it's a cloud managed team, whether it's a different team, but I feel like for me, as long as I'm being challenged every day and I feel like I'm developing my skills, I feel like the specialist route is my route for me, and it makes me the most happiest.
Okay. So next step beyond that would be like a technical marketing guy.
Yeah, you could say that. If you want to go closer to the business unit, technical marketing engineer, and then the product manager. But from a sales perspective, there's SEs, there's different grade levels for an SE, and there's CSCs, and there's different grade levels for CSCs. Then we have something called TSAs, Technology Solution Architect. I would say that's probably the next step. But now a lot of people mix TSCs and TSAs together. So it's like from a specialist perspective, I think you just grow as a CSE and maybe be a TSA after that. But if you want to go to the BU, you could do that as a TME, as a product manager. If you want to, going back to a generalist SE is also for me. It could also be a move for me as well. So there's a lot of other things, but I'm really happy with my role with the cloud managed architecture. I always like to disrupt myself, and anytime I feel too comfortable and I'm not developing, I like to see how I can push myself in a different way.
That's a very good point. Whenever you get comfortable, that means you've learned everything you're going to learn, or you're just not interested in learning anymore. So yeah, I'm glad you're happy. I wasn't trying to imply that you weren't happy. It's just for other people who are SEs, they usually ask me that question, like, hey, what could the next step be? It could be sales or generalist SE or specialist. No, that was a good answer though.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to stay specialist in sales as much as possible.
Okay, that sounds fair. And jumping over to the last question of the day, is there a piece of advice that you have received or wish you had received before switching to an SE role, whether it's the generalist or the consulting SE role?
Yeah, I think the best thing that you could do is get a mentor. When I became an SE and I went to that Jumpstart program, I was fortunate enough to have great mentors like Hikmat was also a mentor for me. Wes, other senior SEs were mentors for me, and I think it really helped me in my development. And also, one advice I would give is don't be so hard on yourself, and don't take yourself so seriously. Because I remember when I was an SC earlier, I would be like super stressed for my customer meeting, and like I had a script, and it's like if I moved away from my script, I would start getting rattled. And what I learned now is leave it dynamic. Yeah, prepare for the meeting, but leave it dynamic. Make it more interactive, and don't be afraid to make fun of yourself, because you are going to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to make fun of yourself. Customers, appreciate that, and they see that you're just a human being, just like they are. Don't get too rattled, too stressed. Nothing is ever life changing. Just be yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. Prepare as much as you need to, but there's such thing as over preparing, where you have a script and you just kind of you leave it so static. Leave it dynamic. Just have a good conversation. Be ready for the questions, but just don't take yourself so seriously. And my personal opinion is to get a mentor, because there's a lot of things that you can learn from that mentor, a lot from their experience that you can't learn by yourself. And those would probably be my two best advices.
You know what? I have a million other questions, but I think that was a perfect piece of advice. And because of that, I think I'll just end on that high note for today. I appreciate your time, Mohamed. Just wondering, where can people find out more about you?
So feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn, I think Ramsey is going to include that in the podcast. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, add me. Feel free to reach out to me there if you have any questions. I use it regularly, and that's probably the best way we can network.
Awesome, Mo. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to playing basketball against you again.
For sure, man. For sure. If I'm in Ottawa, I'll let you know for sure, man. Thanks for having me, Ramsey.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
That's it, guys. I think that's all I have for you this week. Thanks, Mohamed, for being on the show. I really had a blast. I especially enjoyed how you ignored me every time I mentioned beating you at basketball. But I guess that's a good attribute an SE has, thick skin, and let smarty pants comments roll off. We run into a lot of those with customers, and these kind of help build relationships. Again, the show notes are at wethesalesengineers.com/show6. I would ask you to leave a rating or review wherever you listen to it. If you want to stay up to date on the next episode or whenever it's published, 2 ways to do that. Either you can log into my website, wethesalesengineers.com, and subscribe to the newsletter. I'm not selling anything, don't have anything to sell. Maybe down the line, but right now got nothing. So you can subscribe, or you can follow We the Sales Engineers LinkedIn page. I'll have that in the show notes as well if you prefer using LinkedIn. So that's it. Thanks, guys. This is Ramsey signing off.